Welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome to my channel. Hit that subscribe button and I will promise to be as genuine and as honest as possible about every video you watch here, and transparent, and if I don't know, I will tell you, and if I find out something is BS, I will tell you. I am the first to admit when I'm wrong. So if I'm ever wrong, I promise you I will not try to argue and fight about it. I will admit that I'm wrong. So this case has been tremendously hard to figure out what really happened, because we've been told so many different things. And so on this video, I am going to go over the book from chapter 12 to, I think it is 15 that I'm going over. And then my next video will be chapter 16 about the confessions. But this video is about the morning after the murders, or the morning of the murders. And it starts in chapter 12. And the book starts off by talking about the morning of the murders and how Nicole was supposed to go with Shanann to get her Thrive car. She had earned her Thrive car, and her and Shanann were going to go get hers. Like, Shanann had a Lexus because hers was a Thrive car. And so Nicole Atkinson, not Nicole Kessinger, we're going to call her Nicole A., was a little concerned when she didn't talk to Shanann the next morning. And so she went to her house and didn't get an answer. And so she went to the doctor's office, and she knew about HIPAA laws. So she knew that she couldn't get any information, but she just asked them if she had came. And the doctor's office said that she did not show up. So this concerned Nicole, and she went back to the house of Shanann and Chris, and she called Cassie, which Nicole and Cassie were just awesome. I feel like those two women are the reason why this case blew up, and we all need friends like that in our life. And I just pray that the day that I go, that I have friends that are willing to get to the bottom of what happened to me too, if, I don't go with natural causes. But, yeah, those were friends that were loyal and hard to come by. And so immediately they were concerned, and they didn't know what to do, neither one of them. So they were talking to each other. Nicole Atkinson had brought her son to the house with her, and they tried to get in with the code, her and her son, and the latch was latched, which they knew that they latched the latch whenever they were inside so the kids couldn't come out, because Cece liked to go AWOL. So when she saw that latch was latched, she just knew that Nicole had to be in there, especially when she saw her favorite pair of shoes through the little crack of the door, the front door, sitting in the foyer. And she knew that Shanann wore those shoes every day, and that she wouldn't have went to that doctor's appointment or anywhere without the shoes. So then she knew that she had worn these shoes when she got home the other night, just the night before at 1:30 in the morning. So they start calling Chris to get him home. But Chris had already saw Nicole Atkinson and her son. When they used the code, he got an alert on his phone saying that the code had been punched in, and that he saw her face on their doorbell cam. So he already knew that she was trying to get in. And he said that pissed him off, that he was taken aback that she would put in the code and try to get in. And it really bothered him about how fast people noticed that Nicole was missing. Now, granted, he says he did this at 5 in the morning, and already by noon, people were freaking out. So it really bothered him that she was being looked for. And he thought that Nicole using the code and going in and doing all this stuff was off her rocker, instead of himself being off her rocker. He thought Nicole was off her rocker. That's what the book says, because she used the code and was trying to find Shanann. That's his logic, you guys. Okay, and so basically he was so focused on getting rid of his family that he never once thought about her friends. He never knew there was a doctor's appointment the next day. He never knew that him and Nicole Atkinson were going to look for a car. There was such a disconnect between them that he didn't really know what Shanann did. And so he didn't think past killing his family and being with Nicole. He thought that everything ended with being with Nicole. That nothing would go past being with Nicole Kessinger. Remember that. This is going to be kind of hard to keep track of both of them. But mostly right now I'm talking about Nicole Atkinson, the amazing friend of Shanann. So, he says here that he never once thought about her friends and what they had been told, or even about the doctor's appointment. He says he thinks she called 3 times, Nicole Atkinson, and he kept telling her to leave, that he was on the way. So he just kept telling her what she wanted to hear. He never was coming until Nicole Atkinson told Chris, listen, Cassie says I should call the police. He says, don't call the police, I'm on the way. And he actually comes at that point. So, she did anyway, of course, and Chris came right away from that point, and Chris stops at a dumpster. We know from the Discovery reports that Chris stops at a dumpster, and who knows what he got rid of. He may have gotten rid of the blanket that he smothered Cece with. He may have gotten rid of who knows what. But it also says that as they wait on Chris, the police and Nicholas looked in the garage. Nicholas decided to get on top of a car so he could look in the window of the garage, and that's when they noticed that Shanann's car was in the driveway, and they could also see that both the car seats were in the driveway. So Chris had told Nicole Atkinson earlier in the day that she must have went on a play date, that she said she had plans, and Nicole Atkinson knew that she would not leave without her car, and if she did leave without her car, she definitely would have taken those car seats. Nobody that picked her up is just going to happen to have 2 car seats to fit her kid. So anyway, then this proved to Nicole Shanann had to be in the house. As soon as she saw that car in the garage, she just knew that she had to be in the house. She'd already seen her shoes, she'd seen the car, she'd seen the car seats, and so she just felt like if she got in that house, she was going to find her. And the police arrived for the well check at about 1:40. So I lied. I told you wrong. The police didn't come until after Nicholas saw that Shanann's car was in the garage and the car seats were there. So Nicole Atkinson's son was the one that noticed the car in the driveway before the police got there. So imagine how Nicole is feeling at this point when the police do get here, that she's just found out all this information on her own. So the cops didn't even have to figure out that the shoes, the car, and the car seat was there, because this awesome friend had already went and got all this information for them and was able to tell them. So Nicole filled the cop in when he got there about 1:40 p.m. in the afternoon, and so the officer calls Shanann's phone after that. After Nicole Atkinson gives him the story, the officer calls Shanann's phone, and there's no answer, because we all know that the phone is in the couch upstairs. That's where the Discovery says, and the body cameras from the police show us that Nicole Atkinson's son Nicholas had found the phone in the couch. So the officer calls Shanann's phone, and then he calls Chris, and the cops ask to go in through his garage. And Chris immediately says it doesn't work, the code doesn't work, it's broken, and that they can't. So then Chris pulls up. A little while later, he pulls up, and you see him jump out of his truck. I mean, he jumps out of that truck because he doesn't want anyone to meet him there, because of the smell that was probably still lingering in his truck. The smell of Shanann's bodily fluids and probably of death. So then he jumps out. He runs quickly up to the officer, shakes his hand, hauls ass into the garage, and he reaches and opens up Shanann's car door, and he reaches in and he grabs something. We have no idea what he grabs. I think personally he grabbed her wedding ring, which he had taken off once he killed her because they were having financial problems. And so he put the wedding ring in the car and was probably either going, when he stashed the car, he was going to leave it in there, or he was going to get rid of it and get money out of it because Nicole Kessinger told him to pawn it. Now, according to the Discovery reports, that she evidently told him when he said he found the ring that he should pawn it. Crazy, huh? So then Chris runs into the house and is alone in the house for about a minute and a half before he opens the front door to the police officers and to Shanann. Now, he may have ran upstairs and ripped that bottom sheet off of the bed and threw it on the floor, or who knows what he did. Maybe he did that earlier in the day. But he says that he wrapped Shanann in that top sheet and carried her down the stairs. So what I'm thinking is he was afraid that bottom sheet was going to show some evidence, so he turned around and piled it up in the floor of the room. So then, and we all know most of this from the Discovery reports. There's really not a lot of new stuff in these chapters, but I'm just going over it in the order that it happened for those of you that don't know all of these things. So then he opened the door. He was quite annoyed. Nicole storms in and starts looking for Shanann. She doesn't even wait for the invite. She just bum rushes right in. She's on the phone with Shanann's mom, and Shanann's mom says, just go look, just go in. And she did. And so she starts looking, and the cops find Shanann's purse on the kitchen counter with her wallet out. Well, evidently when Nicole first got in there, she had found Shanann's purse in the office and brought it out to the kitchen counter, and that's how it got there. Then they looked to see if she had her ID or her medicine, and that's probably why the wallet was left out, is because they were looking to see if Shanann had taken her ID out of it. So remember that the cops and Nicole Atkinson seen the sheets on the floor in the strip bed, and they all thought that was odd. And then Chris stays on the phone the whole time. It's like he didn't want to make eye contact with anybody. He knew that if he kept staring at that phone, nobody could read his face. Nobody could really ask him a lot of questions because they didn't want to interrupt whatever was going on in case he was contacting family members or whatever. So it also says that Nicole's son finds the phone in the sofa, which I think is when Nicole realizes that Chris did it. Okay? Because in that moment, Nicole's son hands the phone to Chris, and Nicole goes to reach for it, and Chris grabs it, and their hands touch, and you see her jerk back, and so she seems at this point disgusted in him. Go back and watch the body cams, and you'll see that, because in her mind, I think she already knows. So then Chris does not know the password to Shanann's phone, and he could not get in it, which is another reason why we probably think it was stashed in the couch, is because he tried to figure out the password to it so he could come up with an alibi or with where she went, but was very upset that she had changed the password to her phone, so he got pissed off and stuffed it in the couch. Who knows? That's just speculation, but it's a theory. So then Shanann's mom chimes in because she's still on the phone with Nicole Atkinson, and she says it's the baby's due date. Now, we all know that Chris probably had no clue what the baby's due date was. Men, you know, some men keep track of it, but with as much disconnect as they had going on with each other, he didn't know her password. He didn't know any of this stuff. He didn't know what friend she went to go play with, which was his original alibi that the kids had a play date, or his original lie. The kids had a play date, and that's where Shanann was, and he didn't know where it was. So the mom gives the password, and they don't really find anything in her phone, but it is at 50%. So if Shanann came home and was murdered in the morning, I have a feeling that she would have put her phone on the charger before she went to sleep, and that her phone would be at 100%. But seeing as it was only at 50%, he probably killed her right when she got home, because he's saying he killed the girls when he tucked them in, or he thought that he had killed them. So who knows? He may have killed her right when she walked in the door. And he just doesn't want the world to know that he was sitting and lurking and waiting to kill her after he killed his 2 children. So then Nicole lets everyone know that Nicholas comes in, and Nicole's son lets everyone know that the next door neighbor, Nate, has footage of Chris leaving that next morning, or of the house. So they all get excited and think maybe they can see when Shanann left and where she's at and figure out where she's at. And so they all go over there and look at this footage. And on this footage, Chris is seen loading the car. Watching this footage, he gets very anxious and very nervous and doesn't seem to want to watch the screen. And we all know that if our loved one was missing, we would be just zoomed in on that screen so we could see if there was a glimpse of what happened. But he already knew what happened, so he didn't want to look at the screen because he was afraid that there was incriminating evidence on it. So, then the creepiest thing, while they're watching that footage, American Horror Story comes on, and there is a clip of a fetus in a womb, and then there's a clip of oil, and then there's a clip of a skull. Wow. That is just, it just gives me the creeps right now. When I saw it afterwards, of course I didn't notice it when I first watched it, but when I went back and watched it, I was like, wow. It's like a sign from beyond the grave saying, hey, this is where I'm at. And Shanann's family was very close to God and very spiritual. So you just decide about that on your own. But it was also an explosion of oil. So more officers show up. He says he can't check the bank accounts because Shanann kept him out of all that stuff, that he never knew anything about the finances, because I think he already knew that there was no money taken out. So he just wanted to avoid that whole step together because he knew that the cops weren't going to find that she had taken money and left. So then he's texting Nicole the whole time. You see him texting her. You hear him say, hey, I'm going to have to call you back. And so that's pretty obvious in the cop body cams. And so the police call all Shanann's friends. They canvass the area. And then Chris stays alone in the house all night. So chapter 13 starts out with this evil force that Chris speaks about, and he says it was pressuring him for weeks leading up to the murders, and that it chased him until it caught him, and that he kept having this reoccurring dream weeks before the murders that he would wake up alone in his house, his family was gone, and all the lights were on in the house. And so he does say in the book that after the murders, when the first night he stayed in the house, that he literally woke up just like the dream had said he would, with no family, and all the lights were on in his house, and he was all alone. But he says that he vividly remembers turning all the lights off. So, woo! And then he says it was an awful feeling, and he knew that it was coming true when he would have the dream before the murders. So, but why talk about how relieved you are if you were feeling awful? So he says he turned off lights and he went to sleep, but when he woke up, all the lights were on, just like the dream, and that he was all alone. On August 14th, K-9 officers, which is the next day after he did his porch confession. Oh, no, I think he did the porch confession the next day. So the very next day, after he wakes up alone in the house and the lights were on and his dream had came true, the next morning of the murders, K-9 officers were coming. So Chris moved his truck down the street because these were not just carnivore dogs? No, not carnivore. For a dead body. They can smell death and they can smell trauma. And so I feel like that he knew that death and trauma happened in his truck, and so he moved it down the street so these dogs would not pick up on his truck. So that's something that I didn't know from before. And Chris signs the consent to search his home. He gives the cops permission, and when the cops went in for the search, they did document that they smelled very, very high amounts of a cleaning solution or a cleaning chemical, and that you could tell that it had been cleaned. So, and we think that that's what he did the night before. So the dogs picked up on a struggle at the back door, but we all know this is where he moved her body into the truck. And Kessinger calls that day, the day after the murders, asking where is his family. And she said that his voice wasn't right. She says in her interviews that she could tell something in his voice wasn't right, and that but then as soon as she hangs up the phone with him, she starts deleting text messages, emails, and any kind of contact that she had. So Nicole and her dad decide that they're going to do their first interview in the park voluntarily. But what we all do not know, that 2 hours before she decides to do this voluntary this voluntary interview, that her boss at Anadarko had already called investigators and said that they had found Chris and her emails. So the cops already knew about Nikki. She thought that she was coming and giving them information that they didn't have, but they already had all that info about Nikki. And I feel like somebody from her job called and said, hey, our boss already told them about you and Chris. So then she downplays the relationship in that interview, and they knew. She downplays the relationship. She says that she never gave him a key to her house, and that she never knew that Shanann was pregnant, that she never knew Shanann and him were not separated, and she thought he was sleeping in the basement, and all this crap that we all know is total crap, okay? And so then at 8 p.m., the police interview that night, he says it was harder and harder to keep lying. When they brought him back that night, the second day after the murders, they brought him back that night for an interview, and he said that the questions just kept getting harder, that he was squirming, and it was just getting really, really hard. He agrees to come back the next morning for that infamous polygraph test, and he stays with his friends that night. We all know that he stays with his friends that night. So then in chapter 14, it just talks about the interviews, which we've all watched. Nicole and her dad had their interview at the police station, which is all over YouTube. Nicole lied to investigators about the marriage and the baby. She said they never argued, that they had a lot in common, and she did not remember Chris's address. But the day before, she had Googled Chris's address and Ronnie Watts. So she said that Ronnie never, speaking of Ronnie, the author says that Ronnie never knew Chris to be on drugs or mentally ill or violent. He just makes him out to be the saint of the decade. Ronnie called Shanann bipolar, and she said that she forced Chris to take this Thrive, and that he lost a lot of weight, and he says that Shanann had super paranoid tendencies towards Cindy. So you can see here that he's still defending his son and trash-talking Shanann when he has no clue what happened. So then Frank said that Chris was quiet and had no emotions and was acting very, very strange when they were on the trip in North Carolina. So Sandy and Frank, which are Shanann's parents, said that something just was really off about Chris when he was in North Carolina. But we know from the chapters before that Chris even said that it was off, that he had no feelings for his family, that the girls weren't annoying him, and that he just felt aloof. So he admitted that. So she also, Frank also says that he talked to the girls that Sunday night before Chris killed them, and they were eating cold pizza and candy. So then chapter 15 goes into the polygraph. We've all seen that. He felt anger and no remorse, and this is what he tells the officers when they finally get him to confess. He says that he felt anger that morning and no remorse, and that he had never felt anger before. And he swears that there was no rage, that he was angry from being kept from his family, but there was no rage while he was killing Shanann. So he's told two conflicting stories. He said he raged out, he killed her, he couldn't stop, couldn't remove his hands from her throat, and it just happened. Then he says that there was no rage. He planned it out. He meant to do this. He pushed on her jugular vein while she was getting drowsy to make sure that she did die. So I just can't understand how he doesn't see that he's going back and forth and not making sense. Before it was 2 oxys. Now it's just 1 oxy. So I just find it hard to believe anything that he says. He says he felt nothing for them during the polygraph, and he felt nothing for his family. He just wanted to be with Nicole, and he failed miserably. And about that time, the drone found the sheet in the field and the dirt that had been messed with. And so it was all coming to a head anyway. So he's lucky that he confessed before they found the bodies, because he's so worried about what everybody thinks. Had he not confessed and they busted him out, then they would think even worse about him. And how can you worry about what people think when you've done something so atrocious? So he said that before Chris confesses, they found the drone in the dirt pile. So the next chapters of the book is about the confession and about when the cops are talking to him and he finally admits it. So I will go into that chapter after a little while, and I just want to talk a little bit about this right now, because it's just so sad that there are people out there that show no signs. Everybody else keeps saying that Chris showed signs, but there's so many people that say that he didn't. So it's kind of like a 50-50. And for him to read bedtime stories to his kids, give them baths, take such good care of them as he did, and to be able to kill them, it just makes you wonder, that nice guy down the street that you think is so great, what's going on behind closed doors? And so you never know who's going to snap. And sometimes you really got to worry about the quiet people more than you do about the talkers, because the talkers are, what was that saying that I heard the other day? It was, confident people will admit when they're wrong. I can't remember. If I figure it out, I'll tell y'all. This is a sign of my 40 years of age. But now Chris feels like, honest to God, if you've read his letter, it seems to me like he's laying the foundation of trying to get out. He thinks that maybe in 25 years, when everyone sees his jailhouse reform and that he wants to minister, and that that this is only a one-time thing for him, that even the lawyers and the other people knew that this would never happen again, and that he would spend the rest of his life ministering to jails and all this stuff. So honestly, I feel like he's laying the foundation down, thinking that he might get out. So he's still delusional in prison. And so I also wanted to give you guys a little tidbit about the author. I don't know if you watched this in my other video, but I did see some text messages where the author befriended Chris's sister, and the author of this book told Chris's sister that she thought Nicole was in the house that night, and that she had a feeling that Nicole had something to do with it. Well, Chris's sister in turn says, yes, I've always thought that Nicole played a bigger role. And then they talk about how he sent his letter to her, and that he's saying that Nicole had nothing to do with it, that she had not been to the house since July 14th. And so I guess she believed her at that point, but she also said that Chris's sister started saying that Chris was having those headaches again, and that he had one of those bad headaches right before the FBI came, and that he was having the headaches ever since that this happened. And so the lady said, oh, well, can they give him anything for it? And Jamie, Chris's sister, said he wouldn't take anything even if they would. And then she says, I think it's a tumor. Jamie's sister says, I think it might be a tumor. That's why I'm worried about. And then the author said, well, would that explain the out of character of him on August 13th? So Then she proceeds to say that I am going to use all, ALL, and you can go to J is for Justice if you don't believe me. I am going to use all proceeds from this book to get Chris another lawyer and to try to get him a new trial. Okay? This lady that's going around saying that she's unbiased in the book definitely is not unbiased towards Chris. And she's going around saying that Chris can't make any money off of this, but she flat out told Jamie Watts that she was going to use all the money to help Chris. So she baited them, wrote the book, and then turned around and decided not to give him a dime. Now, I know that he can't get a dime, but evidently what she was going to do, this is my guess, is she was just going to continue to put money on his books or use all the money to get the lawyer. She wasn't going to give Chris the money. She was just going to hire him a lawyer with it. So who knows? And I also think in these text messages, she said that the author said she was talking to the warden so she could give Chris something for his birthday. And it was just a journal and a birthday cake. Well, you know how the book says letters from Christopher. I think that she gave him this journal to write in so he could send those to her and she could write a second book. So my daughter pointed that out to me whenever we were reading the text messages. So whenever you put a bunch of heads together, you will get to the bottom of it because one person will figure out something that the other person didn't see. And that's why all these groups are out here for this, is we're all trying to put our heads together and come up with one answer. So, yeah, the author tricked the family big time. And so she says that money's going to domestic violence, and she says this, that, and another, but we will find out. So that is all that I have for this video. I will be back with chapter 16, which is the confession, and the rest of the chapters in this book. Subscribe to my channel. This is not all that I'm going to be doing. I'm going to have a wide variety of content here on my channel. And I promise you that I will be upfront. I will get personal. I will tell you the truth. And I'm not afraid to admit when I'm wrong. I don't know everything. I just want to report what I find out and let you decide if it's true. Bye.